Have you ever wondered how we can find control systems that are exposed on the internet? Right? How do attackers break into control system networks like power plants, mining operations, and factories from over the internet? And that's what we're going to really talk about in this course. So, welcome to OSINT for ICS OT. A big part is really being able to find those issues that you have in your environment or your client's environment, target environment that you're working with, to help find those issues and fix them before an attacker finds them and takes advantage of them. So, real quickly, quick disclaimer for the course. Everything that we're going to talk about is for educational purposes only, and this is to help people really for the forces of good, right? Ideally, nobody's watching this video to take it and use the information that we're talking about for evil. Everything we do talk about, or that I talk about in the course, is for me, myself, and I, right? It's my own opinions. It doesn't reflect my employer during my day job or any of the other different organizations that I'm associated with. So we're going to talk about in the course, and we're just going to really jump into it. You can see the overview here, but jumping into it, just for those of you that don't know who I am, my name is Mike Holcomb. I've been a computer geek since day one. I've always wanted to do not only something in computers, but cybersecurity. I grew up with a little hacker kid that I would watch him crack games and write cheat codes and give himself unlimited lives or unlimited gold. And I always wondered, if someone like that could do these things and nicest guy you'd ever meet, but what would happen if somebody had malicious intent? And so I've always been in IT, I've always been in IT security, and then back in 2010 when Stuxnet was announced essentially to the world, and we'll talk a little bit about that if you're not familiar. That was really what got me more interested in ICS and OT cybersecurity, plus the movie Hackers that came out like 15 years before then. So, but that's me. Again, you can see me here in my day job. This is me. We're actually work in some of the world's largest control system environments. My first project was a large traditional, if you want, power plant for Dominion Energy. That's in that upper left-hand corner. And we do a thing from building, you can see, bridges to running light commuter rail subways, right, in major cities in not only the United States, but in Europe. And then our largest project right now is a 50 billion with a B project for Shell, which is in that lower left-hand corner. It's just a huge, it's like a medium city out there that we've built, which is an LNG, liquid natural gas port facility. So they bring in natural gas, liquefy it, and then put it on container ships to take to other countries. So that's a little bit about me and my day job. Some of you also probably know me from LinkedIn, which is where I started posting about a year and a half, just daily, Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern, with just educational content around helping people understand control system cybersecurity. And whether you're trying to get into the field, whether you're from IT like myself, whether you're from engineering or an OT or an automation background, or an asset owner or an operator, really the content's for everybody that wants to learn more about cybersecurity and control systems. I did write 2 free ebooks. So for folks that do want to understand how to get more involved and learn more about ICS OT cybersecurity. The blue book is for folks coming from an IT cybersecurity background, and the purple book is for folks coming from an engineering and an OT or automation background. So you can find those in the links at the very end. And then I also have, similar to this course, I have a free 25-hour course on YouTube that goes through exactly that, getting started in ICS OT cybersecurity. So a lot of great feedback, and I really appreciate everybody that's watched that course. And I'm sure more than a few of you are here, so I really appreciate you for checking out that course and for being here for this one. So for prerequisites, you don't need any. Right? Anybody can take this course and get something out of it. I would say that, sure, if you have an IT cyber background, if you have a control systems or automation background, if you understand cybersecurity, especially in control system environments, like we talked in my previous course, then yes, you're going to take a lot more out of this course, I would imagine. But at the same time, as long as you want to learn and understand when we talk about finding these issues, especially those that are exposed to the internet, almost always by accident, right? We're not doing these things on purpose. But when we talk about finding these issues and hopefully getting them fixed before an attacker takes advantage of them, as long as you want to learn that, then you're in the right place. So why are we here? And this is where, we start looking at, and I've really kept an eye on the control system cybersecurity space since 2010, and not a little bit before that, but really 2010 moving forward. So basically, almost 15 years at this point. And what we've seen is that first really 10 years, it was almost like crickets. You would have a big attack and then nothing for years. Where now, since the Colonial Pipeline breach we had a few years ago, that we see incidents that involve control system environments, or at least impact control system environments, almost every day now. And whether that's an attack against the IT networks and systems that support an OT environment like a power plant, or against the OT environment itself. Right? We see those types of incidents, again, on a almost daily basis, if not weekly, but at least a couple times a week. These days, there's always something to talk about now, where, again, we went years without any really news about any significant incident. Prior to Colonial Pipeline a couple of years ago, that the only attackers we really worried about in control system environments were state adversaries. And so we would worry about Russia, China, the United States, or name your government here, right? Any entity coming into our environment and not only stealing information, but being able to manipulate the environment to cause perhaps destruction. And so that was always a concern. After Colonial Pipeline, though, Colonial Pipeline was this almost Pandora's box for the rest of the world, for all the other attackers out there, besides the state adversaries, to understand, hey, there's this thing out there called OT or ICS, or we use the terms interchangeably here. So that there's this thing called ICS or OT, or control systems. And if we target that, we can make money. And not only that, but they're also understanding that a lot of the computers that we have in these OT environments are running Windows. I think a lot of people still realize that. They're running Windows, they're running Active Directory. They need to be patched, just like every other Windows machine. So not only are we especially adding more Windows machines these days, so it only makes us that much more vulnerable in OT, and we have more attackers out there, which is why we're seeing more attacks. We also see more connections between the IT and the OT networks, and the OT networks becoming more reliant on systems in the IT side, which is where the attackers are almost always getting in first and then using that connection to move into the OT network. So they get into the back office environment from over the internet, where employees are, right, they're browsing the internet, they're reading their email, so they're clicking on links, they're opening up an attachments that they shouldn't be, to infect their systems and give attackers access to their machines. And then the attackers use that access to then find a way to move from the IT or the back office network into the plant network, to the OT network. And then sometimes, whether on purpose or accidents, and by accident, and we'll talk about instances of both, but sometimes those control systems on the OT network in the plant environment, they get connected accidentally, or again, sometimes on purpose, directly to the internet, so attackers can see them. And that's really the main focus for this course. Because if I'm an attacker, let's say even if you have something like a camera, a webcam that you set up so that you could launch your plant environment from home, just to make sure that you don't see any smoke, right? Nothing's on fire. That camera alone, if I was to be able to hack into that camera and take control over it, it would act as that initial foothold on the OT environment. And that's all it takes to allow an attacker to get into the plant environment. That's a very common scenario that we'll see. And we'll see some examples as we go throughout this course. And they also make, we mentioned, denial of service or distributed denial of service targets for attackers, and that's being able to take that system offline. Ooh, maybe you lose the webcam. Okay, not the end of the world, but what if it's a control system that's responsible for controlling part of or all of a plant? And what if that system goes down, then your plant goes down. So imagine that power plant that goes down, or your water treatment facility, or your manufacturing plant. Then what happens? You're not generating power, right? You're not able to deliver clean water, right? Nobody has water at the taps. You're not manufacturing whatever goods that you create. So here's an example of a system. This goes back to late last year. This was the end of 2023, where there's a group of what they call hacktivists that are in Iran, or they're aligned with Iranian state wishes, let's say, and that they target these control systems that are made by Unitronics, which is an Israeli company. And so these systems that are made in Israel, they're being targeted by these Iranian hacktivists that call themselves the Cyber Avengers. And so you can see if they find this system, which is a combination of, it's a PLC, programmable logic controller, which is the most common type of control system we use to control other actions in the real world. And then it also has a built-in HMI, or what they call a human machine interface. So it's a screen that allows you to see the process and be able to push buttons to be able to manipulate that process, like turn it on and turn it off. It's really just like your thermostat you have maybe at home or at the office, where the room gets too warm, so you can go and push a button to turn on the air conditioner and make it cooler. And then when the temperature in the room gets back to where it should be, what they call a set point, then the system, the PLC or the thermostat, turns off the air conditioner. And so this was actually a system that was used to brew beer. So this was actually from a brewery. And I had actually found this picture on Reddit, and we're actually going to talk about using OSINT and social media in our third section, or third part in the course. But not to jump too far ahead. But this was a system that was purposefully connected to the internet. The gentleman who did this even said, I know this isn't a great idea, but basically they wanted to be able to monitor the system from home. He actually segregated it, or he walled it off from all the other machines at the brewery. So he knew it could get hacked, and so he didn't want it to be used by attackers to attack any other machine. So in some ways he was thinking along the right lines, but it should never been exposed directly to the internet to begin with. And there are ways to make those types of systems accessible over the internet, but to also do it securely. And if you don't, then this is what happens. Now, did the brewery go down? He was able to back up and restore the system from backup pretty quickly. This same group had targeted a bunch of different water treatment facilities in the U.S. and globally. They actually found one in Ireland where they had taken water down for 600 people for 2 days, which is an impact. Right? It's, of course, more of I guess you could say, an inconvenience for those people for 2 days. But what if it was 2 weeks? That's more than an inconvenience at that point, right? Or 2 months? Or what if it's 6,000 people or 60,000 people? Or what if it's not water? It's we don't have power. Right? Those are the types of questions we have to start asking ourselves when we talk about control system cybersecurity. Here's another example. This is a real functioning, working human machine interface, the HMI I was mentioning earlier. So before this one got hacked, it looked something more like this. Right? Again, where you can ideally get an idea of what's in the environment, what they call the process that you're controlling. In this case, we see there's a bunch of pumps, and then we have these different buttons to be able to go in and manipulate those pumps, right? Turn them on, turn them off, speed them up, slow them down. And of course, we can program and automate the process. That's why we're talking about, automation systems. And we have this control system that allows us to be able to look at those systems and be able to control them and automate them. And that if we need to, as humans, we can jump in there and make changes. So a lot of times we find these also connected to the internet. Sometimes they're in read-only mode, so nobody can manipulate them remotely, which is great. But do we still really want it exposed to the internet? And then we also see sometimes they can be interacted with, and that's where there's definitely a concern. So we'll look at how you can find these on the internet. This took 5 seconds to find, literally. And again, we'll talk about that in a couple of different ways. And you can find control systems connected to the internet, whether you're using a traditional search engine like Google or one specialized for control system environments like Shodan that you might have heard about. So why are we here? And the idea is that a lot of people still today don't see the importance of control system cybersecurity. So really, this is a way to help educate people, right? To raise the level of awareness, right? To understand the need that's out there. Whether it's the people that own these different types of OT environments like manufacturing and power plants, or the people that run them, the asset, what they call it, the asset operators. Even the security team sometimes don't take security and control systems as seriously as they should, which might sound strange, but it's true. Sometimes they think they don't have to do anything because nobody's died yet. So we're going to wait for somebody to die before we do something about it. That just blows my mind. I'm trying to take the opposite approach and be proactive again, which is why we're here. So back to our earlier examples, what happens if we lose power? A couple hours, not the end of the world. A couple days, that's going to be rough. A couple weeks or months or longer, that's when you get into like Fallout, Mad Max territory, right? Into the world. Something that we don't want to have to encounter. But there is potential there, and we start to see, right, little signs. It's one of those that, again, these are only going to continue to get worse. So we talk about, we're here in the class to understand, right, how we can better protect the world around us. It doesn't matter where in the world you're from. You just want to do your best to protect your family, right, yourself, your friends, right, your community, maybe your country. It doesn't matter where you're from. We all share that same and common want and need. Most of us do, I should say. So when I put this course together, it was really designed as this kind of high-level course about how we use open source intelligence. Now, really the first half or so is more like an IT OSINT course. So if you've taken IT OSINT courses, probably a lot of this will sound familiar. But again, we're always looking at it from the control systems perspective. So it's really to help, whether, again, you come from IT, from OT, right? If you're a pen tester, because penetration tests where you're actually paid and authorized to break into environments always starts with performing OSINT, or what they call reconnaissance, against your target environment. The course was built to help everyone. We're just talking about understanding, again, most importantly, how we find these issues, how we find these vulnerabilities that we've exposed to the internet. Again, whether by accident, more than likely, sometimes on purpose, like that PLC we saw in the brewery, and help people find those issues and fix them before the attacker can find, right, the exposed PLC, and then they can put up, their little screen to say, hey, we were here. But ultimately, when you start to think about, it's not about, I'm not necessarily worried about the hacktivist that's going to put up their little screen, but the one that's going to potentially take down a power plant for weeks or months. Or what if they were able to manipulate the process environment to be able to create an explosion that would harm or potentially kill somebody or would harm the environment, right? If we had an explosion at a chemical plant, maybe let's say nobody's at the plant, but what's the damage to the local environment? Maybe the general population around that plant. So we want to find these issues before attackers do, before they can use them against us. So when I wrote this course, I wrote it from the perspective if you work in a control system environment, right? You want to find those issues related to your environment and you want to fix them. Easy as that. So whether you work in an OT environment on the security team, if you're a consultant for OT environments, if you're a penetration tester, right, you're authorized to conduct attacks against an OT organization, or you want to learn more. I did not write this from a perspective of this is how you are an attacker against OSINT, though we definitely touch on some of those areas. I also did not write it as I always say, a true OSINT expert, right? I'm not, trying to teach someone how to hunt down a human trafficker or a child pornographer, from over the internet, right? Where we have to worry about our own safety and considerations. Right? We're not talking about truly remaining anonymous online, right? That's just not this world that we're talking about. Right? We're talking about using the basics of OSINT, the really information we find for free out on the internet, to then find all this data, give it some meaning, right? Some context, so we find what's meaningful to us in our organization, and then put that information to use. That's what we're talking about in this course. Now, we talk about privacy and ethical considerations because we're going to find some information that you might not even have wanted to know. Sometimes I find information about a particular individual. It's like, I didn't necessarily need to know that. Or if you find sensitive information about an organization that you shouldn't have known about. Right? So we have to understand, what do we do when we find this information? And we'll talk about some examples as we go along throughout the course. But make sure that as you're going through and you're collecting all this data, and we don't know what's sensitive and not, and what's not at first, as we're just collecting all these vast amounts of information. But as we collect the data, we have to treat it all as confidential, and then especially as we start to find sensitive pieces of information to an organization. What if you find a vulnerability that an attacker could use really easily to break into an OT environment like a power plant? That would be extremely sensitive. We have to treat everything as confidential, which means we have to protect it. Right? So we only keep the data we need. We make sure we keep it in a secure location. It's encrypted. And we'll take some other steps to secure that information, which we'll talk about as well as we go throughout the course. Now, when you talk about tools, and even if you come back and watch this course in a year or two down the road, right, some of the tactics and techniques and the tools might not be as effective as they are today. This is very true if you took an OSINT course 5 years ago. I use the example of Recon NG, which was the king of OSINT tools. Some people still consider it is. Recon NG was written by Tim Tomes. Tim's a friend. He lives 10 minutes from me. And even he will tell you Recon NG just is not as effective as it used to be because so much of its functionality is lost because no, you can't do automated lookups through Google and Bing these days like you used to 5 years ago. And really, a lot of the functionality you get from Recon NG is um, behind very expensive paywalls. So in this course, we talk about free or almost free tools. So we don't even get into Recon NG in this course, whereas if I was teaching this even a few years ago, we would have been talking about Recon NG. But definitely, it's if you want to spend more time in OSINT, definitely check it out. But also, and then keep in mind, some tools might even on purpose violate different privacy and ethical considerations. So you have to be really careful with which tools that you use, and we'll have that conversation as we start looking at some of these tools. I love tools, trust me. I love tools. If there's a new tool, I want to try it out and see if it works for my needs or not. And so that's a big part of this course is looking at different tools. And we'll look at one or two that really kind of are on that edge. If they crossed any privacy or ethical considerations, then we definitely wouldn't be talking about them. But right, we'll see some that kind of get close, but always make you think. So for the course, so there's some materials I have, and these are going to be hosted on the GitHub, which are going to be on the last slide in this video. So there's a bunch of quick start reference guides that I've created over time for Shodan as well as for Nmap. So you're going to see those. Again, these are hosted. Here's the example of the one I built specifically for ICS OT. There's also one for just general kind of use if you want IT, but so we'll look at those in a later section. There's review questions. So at the end of each part that actually has content, there's no review questions for this part, but the other parts have 10 review questions. So you can look at those. There's some other materials. So there's a reporting template. There's some scripts that I've created with ChatGPT to help with different OSINT tasks. And then we'll talk about some of those. I'll even show you how to build them as we go throughout the course. And then there's also labs that you can walk through. Now we're going to be walking through these as we go throughout the course, and that's a lot of the time involved in the course, but you're also free to access that lab manual and just walk through it on your own. And all you need really is a Windows machine to complete the vast majority of those labs. If you also want to install virtualization software like VMware or VirtualBox, then and to run Kali Linux, or you run Kali Linux from the Windows Store on your Windows machine, great. So we're going to take a quick look at the different parts in the course. Of course, we're here in the course introduction. The next section, we're going to really start to talk about what is OSINT. So we're going to talk about some background and how we collect all of this data off of the internet, and we give it this context to make it meaningful so we can take action. Right? Because I don't really care about all the information out there on the internet. I just care about what information as it relates to my organization or my clients. We can gather information from social media. So we're going to spend some time there, especially with LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the one place we always want to go when we're looking for sensitive information about a target organization, especially around things like who works there, right? Hardware, software that they use in those environments, what maybe special projects they have. So we'll see some examples of why LinkedIn is our favorite social media platform when talking about OSINT from an IT and OT cybersecurity perspective. You can see in part 4, we're going to look at how do we gather email addresses for target organizations and usernames to log into systems, and how do we even get passwords to log into those systems? Where I used to think, oh, this stuff never works. And you know what? It doesn't work all the time, but it works a lot more than you think it would. And you only have to get lucky once. And most engagements I've done, I've got, lucky with usernames and passwords multiple times. I've never got shut down, so to speak. In part 5, we talk about how we find different domain names and subdomains for an organization. In my day job, we have hundreds of domain names. We have a couple dozen that we actively use. And I should say, we don't have hundreds of domains that we have reserved. We have thousands. So you imagine, it's a little almost intimidating to manage at times, because not everybody's going to tell me when they register a new domain. I have to find it a lot of the times. So how do we find those domain names, the IP addresses, right? The subnets. We'll also talk about autonomous system numbers, which come into play mostly for medium and large size environments, especially those with maybe a global footprint. So that's what we're going to talk about in part 5. And then we get into, I think, what most people consider the really fun stuff. So using search engines like Google to find control systems that are exposed to the internet. Like, oh, and no, we could do that. Oh, we can. And we'll see some great examples. Now, there are search engines that were built for finding control systems on the environment, like Shodan is the most common example. So we're going to spend some time, yes, definitely with Shodan and the tools that allow you to interact with Shodan, like SMAP, which we're going to talk about. So yeah, version of Nmap, but one that uses Shodan data. And we'll talk about some other special search engines for control system environments, like the Open Infrastructure Map, which is a credible map where you can look in any area in the world, basically, to see what infrastructure like power, rail, and water that are there. And then we'll wrap up with a real quick discussion about how to write a report if you need to. So a lot of times when I write reports, it's more in a pen test report, not writing direct OSINT reports. But some of you might have that in your role. A lot of times, if I just find an issue, I type it up and write it up in an email and send it off to the person I need to ask that, hey, we need to get this fixed. And then the last part, again, you'll have access to the review questions through the GitHub repository for the course, but we'll actually go through or walk through those questions. So if you want to walk through the questions and understand, well, how did we get this answer? We're going to go through those in the very last part. So as we wrap up, I just want to talk about, there are a couple of certifications out there. I'm a big fan of TCM, or the cyber mentor. That was Heath Adams, who founded TCM Security. I knew just as he was starting his journey as the cyber mentor. He's from Charlotte, North Carolina, and he had come to speak at one of our first B-Sides Greenfield conferences. And so I've really admired all the work he's done by not only putting so much of his content out on the internet for free, which you can see has been an inspiration for myself, but also that he offers these relatively low-cost certifications, and that different companies see these as, I say, real certifications that when they're looking to hire somebody, they actually see them as legitimate, which they are. I'm not trying to say they're not in any stretch of the imagination. So I really have admired the work that they do. So they actually have a practical junior OSINT researcher certification that you can get. Now, there's also SANS. I love SANS. I think most people that know me know I do. I love all the people that work there. They all typically are great human beings, and they write top tier materials. Everybody talks about it. You go to class and it's like drinking from a fire hose for 5 or 6 days. The only problem with SANS is it's $9,000 for a SANS course these days. So unless your company's paying for it, and even then, I think it would be hard to justify an OSINT course, because there is so much general IT OSINT material out there on the internet for free. I'm not saying don't go to SANS if work's not going to cover it for you, but I don't know. It just seems like there's so much content out there for free. Like, why not take advantage of it? So, but if again, work's paying for you, you feel like you need that certification for maybe a job, right? Those are a lot of the common reasons people would go to that course, I think. But yeah, I'm not trying to talk down against it in any stretch of the imagination either. So I'm sure it's a great course with a lot of content. And if you want to get up to speed, especially on OSINT, like very, very quickly, it's one of those things that SANS courses are awesome at doing. And lastly, I just want to talk about some of the other resources that are out there. So Michael Bazzell is, I think, considered by most one of the leading experts in the field when we talk about OSINT. And he also looks not only at how do you find people on the internet or find things and issues and vulnerabilities or your exposures on the internet, but then he also turns it around and says, teaches people how to stay anonymous on the internet. So, especially where he works with a lot of big celebrities and politicians. So you can kind of see it from both angles, right? And which, it makes sense. So you can find him at Intel Techniques, and he has a lot of great books, and he updates those fairly regularly because, like we were mentioning earlier, tools and tactics and techniques, they change over time because websites change over time, right? Social media changes over time, right? Just things change. So he makes sure to keep all of his content updated, which I really appreciate. So definitely check out his materials. I also watch a lot of Jason Haddock's material, or I've always just followed him probably for at least 10 years. And a big focus of his is doing internet reconnaissance against target environments. And so that's something that he talks about a lot in the bug bounty world today. Not only himself, but Ben or Nahamsec. So you can check them out as well. I'm not worried about, bug bounty is really broken into two things. Probably 10-20% of it is the reconnaissance or the OSINT perspective, right? Finding targets, especially those targets of opportunity. And then the rest is web application hacking. I'm not a web application hacker. I mean, I can do a decent job at it, but I'm probably a junior web hacker, web app hacker at best. So why I watch, their content, it's for the reconnaissance piece. Again, you want to talk about cross-site scripting, SQL injection. Honestly, I don't care, right? Unless I'm protecting a particular environment against those vulnerabilities. But I want to see the OSINT. I want to see the reconnaissance. I want to see, what are the latest tools and the techniques. So whenever, Jason kind of updates his materials, probably on a, annual basis, maybe every 6 months, yeah, I definitely want to check out his stuff when he's, talking. Same thing with Nahamsec. Now, the ICS advisory project, which was put together by Dan Ritchie, is definitely a labor of love for Dan, but definitely also needed to help kind of raise awareness around the vulnerabilities in control systems. So very similar, like how we would look for CVEs or vulnerabilities in IT. We're going to find those vulnerabilities in our control systems so we understand what's there and what we're protecting against. And what if one of these was exposed directly to the internet? How much risk is actually there? Is this really, really, really bad, or is it's not a big deal? We need to be able to understand. And so, again, that's a big part of what kind of this underlying theme as we go throughout this course. It's not only finding these issues or these exposures that we have, but understanding, like, how bad is this? Really, really bad, and we need to get this fixed now, or we get to it when we get to it. So with SANS, besides the courses and the great content that they put together, they do make a lot of material available for free for the community. So there's a SANS blog dedicated to OSINT, and they even have a LinkedIn community, which it looks like there's some good conversation there. Some of it's just advertisements that people post. I get it, right? That just happens. But if you can weed through that, there's definitely some good conversation. You can make a lot of great context in the OSINT community because so many people are on LinkedIn and they use it as a way to connect and actually share information. And you can get some of the world OSINT leaders, which I spelled incorrectly on the slide apparently. so so definitely keep that in mind. So check those out. And that brings us to the end. So I just want to say thank you for everybody if going through this first part, coming through the course. If you like this section, if you like the course, if you can like the video, subscribe to the channel. But if you're looking for those additional resources, this is where you can find me on LinkedIn, where you can find my website, or you can email me. Obviously, you're on the YouTube channel, so you're already here, but then also the GitHub repository where you can find all of the resources for the lab. So thanks again for showing up, and I'll see you in part 2.